read all or part of this book. Good. I'm going to tell the rest of you why you need to read it. I edited this book. I made the mistake, like Mary did, of saying, "Oh, I'll do anything," and I had no idea how much work it takes to get something like this on the shelf. It's just Braddock's True Gold, and we had the same headaches that you went through. And it won't cost anything. It'll take a very short amount of time. Took us a year. I don't know how much it cost because most of it was volunteer, but Fairfax County formed a committee to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the Jamestown settlement, and they decided to do a book. So they put out a call for stories, expecting to get a couple, but they got about 40 of them. They were only going to publish about 12, but they couldn't resist putting in about 34 stories. The committee was mostly historians who really know this county. It's impressive. So they got down to 34, and I said, "Can I edit them?" And that was my first mistake. Anyway, so these 34 stories, the committee chose them for interest, for how well the story was told, and the topics they covered. So it was purely by accident. The stories cover the whole 400 years, starting from the very first story and ending with Jack Harrity, who was supervisor chairman in the 1980s. And I thought the stories might clump around, say, the 20th century or Civil War or something like that, but it's a accidental span. While I was editing the book, I kept looking up in my ABC map. Where's Lincolnia? Where's Franconia? Where's the workhouse in relation to the poorhouse? And where's Ivacoda Farm? So I said to my husband, who's a geographer, make a map for this book. It really needs one so that I don't have to keep looking things up. So he made a beautiful map. And as you can see, every black dot on here is for a story, and they're all numbered. The interesting thing is they cover the whole county, which was an accident too with all these stories that were submitted. You would think, I would have guessed they would be all clumped in the middle around Fairfax City, but they cover the whole county, which is neat. Plus, you can see where everything is in relation to one another too. And each one of those dots is a particular story, and Jack Harrity got a whole parkway, which is only fitting. The reason you have to read this book is because there's something for everybody in here. You'll read about politics and politicians, ancient history, specific people, buildings and houses, Ivacoda Farm, the workhouse, the poorhouse, civil rights, the Civil War, the Cold War, the Nike missiles, spies and duels, neighborhoods and towns, personal struggles and people helping those less fortunate. And we even have a poem and a ghost story. I think those are the only two that are fiction. The rest are all true. And there's lots about women in this book too. The Mount Vernon Ladies Association, which is the oldest national preservation organization, was founded to save Washington's home, which at the time had old ship masts holding up on the front porch, holding up the roof. That was, there was no money when it was in private hands to keep it up, so that group was formed to save it. Antonia Ford, who was in Fairfax City, may have been a spy for the Confederates. Dr. Kate Waller Barrett founded Ivacoda Farm for girls and women in need. The suffragists picketed the White House and were hauled away in the dark of night in wagons over rough roads in the wilds of Fairfax County down to Lorton, where they were stripped of their personal belongings, their dignity, and eventually their health. And Judy Street joined the March on Selma. Her account is chilling to read. You really feel like you're on the bus with her together on the train. And Martha Panino helped make Fairfax County what it is today. There are stories about men building great or lasting or important things, such as the areas of Lincolnia, Franconia, Herndon, Mount Zephyr, which I had never heard of before, railroads, post offices, the poorhouse, There are stories of well-known people like, of course, Fitzhugh and Washington, who built large houses that we have protected and saved, or Jack Harrity, who pushed, some say he dragged or shoved Fairfax County to new horizons. And there are stories of everyday people who lived less famous lives but still left their mark. People like Jeremiah Moore, Jim Robinson, L. Hannon Wakefield, Antonia Ford, Robert Gunnell, John Bell, Sid Holland, Martha Panino. I had never heard any of these names before I read the book and realized what the huge parts they had to play in Fairfax County. That's why you have to read it to find out who all these people were. There are also families. John Bell's family, the Olivers, the Wilkinsons. I never heard of them either until I read the book, and they certainly were interesting to read. And of course there are specific events that happened in Fairfax County, such as the duel between John Randolph and Henry Clay. Randolph showed up for the duel that afternoon in a white bathrobe and never explained why he was wearing a white bathrobe. The darker sides of our history are also included. There's slavery, of course, the treatment of women at the workhouse, which is heartbreaking, the neglect almost to the point of loss of Washington's Mount Vernon, the loss of two of Fitzhugh's houses, the Civil War, the residents of the poorhouse, and Ivacota Farm, the Cold War, those Nike missiles, the grisly murder at Keene's Mill that was very much cleaned up for the ghost story, the March on Selma. So it's safe to say this book is about people. The people who made major changes to society and the area. Washington, Fitzhugh, Panino, Harrity, groups of people who had an impact, the Filipino Americans, the black slaves, Mount Vernon Ladies Association, the suffragists, the Fairfax Education Association, the Freedom Marchers, individuals who did interesting things, and people whose names we have forgotten or whose names don't really matter. They just lived their lives and sometimes recorded them in letters and diaries. Those are the people who kept civilization going, who grew food, went to work, partied, raised good citizens, built railroads and buildings, voted their conscience, obeyed the law, and sometimes did good things most of the times, and sometimes did bad things. They were good or bad people. We really went down to the wire on this book when we were finally finished. Irma Clifton, who was chair of the Legacy Book Subcommittee, and until recently my boss as editor of the Chronicle newspapers, Paula Elzey, a publisher who served as our publishing expert, she wrote herd on everybody to get this book looking better than just a pamphlet. The three of us raced off to the printing company in the Fullerton Industrial Park on the morning of Celebrate Fairfax 2007. The freshly printed books were packed in boxes and the glue was still warm. It was literally still warm. We had them loaded into my station wagon and we raced off, not exceeding the speed limit, of course, to the government center in Fairfax, where we had to convince the properly doubting guards to let us in the back way to the loading docks. The books were unloaded and we snatched a box and raced upstairs to the 6th floor to finally deliver our baby to Jerry Connolly, who of course was not there. He's out at the fair where he should have been. But we were finished. And it was like taking a huge load off of all our shoulders. It was painful. It was fascinating. It was a lot of struggles, a lot of people butting heads, myself included, to get commas put in and semicolons taken out. But that was what I volunteered to do. But it really is a treasure. And even if you say you're not interested in history, I'm saying that to the young kids, because history, the way they teach it in school, is boring. This war happened at this year, and this person fought in this war, and you go to sleep instantly. Then you grow up and find out there are stories like these in history. And this is why people are interested in history, because it's absolutely fascinating. I just want to read a couple excerpts